Server-based applications means you have to keep up with all the latest attacks. Most server-based applications have huge attack surface area. All the endpoints for managing that content, administering your application, are out there for your hackers to hack. And if you use a CMS, plugins are a big risk. Anything that you add to your system, all our admin accounts, the content, or simply denial of service attack. Attacks are continuously becoming more sophisticated and evolving, and using a popular framework or CMS might, give you a better support and quick fixes for attacks, but it also means that system is also the more popular ones that get attacked. I used to run a shared hosting service for many years, and I seen firsthand some of the crazy things that can compromise a website or even entire servers. The expectations of our visitors aren't too demanding. They only want your apps to be modern and beautiful, interactive, dynamic, be real time with some messaging and videos with transitions, and be mobile first. It's easy to build web apps today, right? And then there's all these ways of measuring performance. There's time to first byte, time to first paint, time to load, time to first interaction, time to last byte, bounce rates, request per second, throughput, error rates. I think what we need is more acronyms in technology, don't you think? Why don't we have all these ways to measure performance? Well, because seconds count. A single second could mean that visitors give up and lose interest, or you lose potential customers. And there's been lots of different studies that have been done. You can read about those if you grab my slides. There's a link there for why performance matters. That's got some really good case studies, and there's a bunch more. But even if we aren't building an e-commerce site, or performance, in different ways affects how people perceive our service, and in turn impacts our credibility and trust. In recent years, we've seen amazing emerging trends in web technology. More than ever before, it's possible to build, these rich, dynamic web apps without ever touching a single server. There's, no traditional hosting, no servers to provision, no virtual machines, no servers to maintain. We get to do things like open up a terminal and type git push, and then like that, magic happens. It's really, really cool. What a day to be alive. And you have, at a push of a button, you can have an industry-leading, fast, scalable, globally distributed, secure, highly available, fully decoupled, agile, lean, fault-tolerant, flexible, decoupled, world-class, interactive, personalized, dynamic, mobile-first, progressive, disruptive, real-time, seamlessly integrated digital transformation with analytics, AI, and machine learning. What a time to be alive. Jamstack. This is a talk about Jamstack, right? Jamstack is nothing new. Netlify, a popular content delivery network, or CDN, coined the name Jamstack. Jamstack is not a particular technology or a vendor. In some ways, you may already have parts of the Jamstack in your stack. Jamstack is a label, like Web 2.0. You remember Web 2.0, the rise of Ajax? Jamstack is a set of emerging trends for building modern web apps. And those include Git workflows, continuous integration, continuous deployment, static site generators, front-end frameworks, APIs, and CDNs. The Jam in Jamstack stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. Although JavaScript is part of the acronym, and JavaScript is absolutely the primary language for the browser, for making front end more dynamic, you can still choose whatever language you wish for your things like templating and building your assets and automating your deployments and creating back-end APIs and so forth. All right, you remember in our web request walk of shame, we had this thing that was pretty awesome called caching. Well, it was awesome when it worked, not so great when it didn't work. A cache can be introduced at lots of different levels from the database on up, and the goal of a cache is to reduce compute cycles so that there's less work for the database or the server to do, there's less latency, fewer network calls, all those great benefits. But I submit to you, do you know what the best cache hit is? The absolute fastest request a web server can serve is a request for a static file. Read a file from the disk and you send it, right? There's no calls to other APIs, no databases to query, no templates to execute. Anything more than a static file requires more CPU cycles to execute code, to generate a response. A static file will win over code every time. The heart of Jamstack, the number one goal, is to maximize the amount of pre-built markup and assets. And all the other technologies and practices that kind of make up a typical Jamstack architecture come down to how can we make the workflow better, faster, more automated. How can we maximize the amount of the application that we can make static and then push those static assets to the edge as close as possible to our customers. And the edge, is typically like CDNs. CDNs are extremely powerful. They have become cheaper, in some cases completely free. They're smarter in regards to deployments and cache invalidation. They reduce latency and being closer to the client. CDNs are the experts when it comes to scaling to meet demands as well as restraining the hackers. Now, there's an unfortunate negative connotation to the word static. We've been, us who have been in programming for a long time, that's our bread and butter. This is the work that we do, and static is, we don't want none of that. We can't program static. But in the modern world of web development, static is anything but that. Static is your pre-compiled HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, images, and any other kinds of assets. But once that content is delivered to the client can be as dynamic as you want it to be. There's all kinds of creative ways, not just JavaScript, but there are ways to make websites dynamic and personalized as much as you need. The shift in thinking is from the runtime being on the web server to the runtime being on the client. The design of a Jamstack application is kind of like a native mobile app, if you think about it. A mobile app is pre-built. It includes most, if not all, assets that it needs. It connects to other APIs when it needs to, which can be, your own APIs or powerful third-party APIs. It's designed to load fast, super fast, and it's super interactive, right? You don't have a mobile app that looks like an image that you can't interact with. So, back to our web request walk of shame. Now, in comparison, I now give you the Jamstack request to glory. We have our client, the desktop or mobile app. It makes a request to a resource, which, a page, which could be routed to the nearest server on the content delivery network. And now, get this, you won't believe what happens next. It serves the file back to the client. Bam. There's nothing faster. You have achieved ludicrous speed. So how do we get there? In light of the information I've given you so far, what if I told you that you need to stop writing silly server-side code in Java, .NET, PHP, Node.js, or whatever it is that you use, and instead focus on building static assets? Sounds disgusting, right? I get it. That was my reaction too. I'm not going to give up my favorite platforms, my favorite languages and frameworks. Well, I submit to you that there's no code faster than no code. Am I right? And there's no code more secure than no code. If your application is made up of static assets, a huge portion of your application's attack surface area simply disappears. Now, before you completely dismiss everything I'm saying, give me a few more minutes of your time and try to keep an open mind. All is not lost. You can still use your favorite platforms and languages, just perhaps in new and different, more focused ways. A typical Jamstack architecture and workflow might look similar to the following, where you have a repository where you have your front-end UI and content and templates that are used for rendering your static assets. You might have a CMS that's designed for Jamstack, where you maintain your content apart from the web app. And you may have some APIs for your platform that you've built, or other APIs that you're subscribing to as part of your architecture. And when you make a change to your source code or any of the content in your CMS, or update an API, there's some kind of trigger or webhook or something that starts your build process to build your application. Your build process takes the markup and templates in your repository and compiles all the assets for your application. At this point, it might reach out to your CMS, your APIs, your databases, etc., for additional content and data to compile all of that content. And as much as possible, the final output will be like a snapshot of everything that makes up your application at that moment in time. And that gets deployed to your servers, typically, hopefully a CDN, so that all that gets dispersed closest to where your customers are. When a page is requested, the static content is delivered and rendered as quickly as technically possible. Your application might then use JavaScript to progressively enhance your application using your APIs or other third parties. One of the many benefits of using a CDN is atomic deployments. This means that every new build of your application is deployed throughout the CDN, and then, like flipping a switch, all of the new content is changed at the same time in a transaction. Your users should never see inconsistent results. This also means that if you need to, it makes it very easy to roll back versions of your application. And you can do that with confidence. Static site generators have been dismissed as being only good for documentation, but today there are some amazing generators for just about every language and platform. I've used several of these, and I think, well, maybe for the exception of Jekyll, which has been around the longest, they're all pretty good. Jekyll's not bad either. In recent years, we've also seen an explosion of great API platforms, and the market will continue to grow, and you can progressively add new features to your applications from these best APIs that are available. Like, for example, why would you dare build a system for sending text messages or emails when you could leverage an expert like Twilio or SendGrid? Why build a payment system when you could use something like Stripe? And why would you want to build any kind of authentication, which is changing and so volatile, and the security and stuff all the time. Why wouldn't you want to use somebody like Okta or Auth0 or one of the other providers? These are the experts. They're far more vested in being the very best at what they do than you could ever be with your own implementation. Plus, your attack surface area is minimized. These third-party APIs carry the burden of, securing and scaling their own infrastructure. They know a thing or two because they've seen a thing or two. And if you need to build your own APIs, now would be the perfect time to consider something such as AWS Lambdas, Azure Functions, Google Functions, or Netlify Functions, which are just, sugar-coated AWS Lambdas, which I love, by the way. I think it makes building functions really easy. I have no affiliation with Netlify whatsoever. Sorry about all this stuff. I'm a fan. Edge functions are now a thing where you can have functions deployed to the edge, just like your assets, which can dramatically improve performance and give you alternate ways of creating dynamic systems for your web apps. Why did the spider get glasses? She wanted to improve her website. All right, taking the Jamstack approach to decouple your front end, JavaScript, APIs, and markup creates a predictable and confidence building continuous integration type process. And when you're doing all these things, like I've been talking about, there's still a lot of choices to be made in creating a Jamstack architecture, but the overall architecture is incredibly liberating. Back-end developers can really focus on APIs and services. Front-end developers can really focus on the design and experience. And, I don't know about, the environment that you're in, but it's a lot of the companies that I've worked for in the past, there's tremendous amount of effort that's spent by web teams, even developers, in building and managing infrastructure, deployments and database migrations and load balancers and caching and just copying files around, like FTP or something, managing secrets, config files, environments, infrastructure versus building new real features that bring value to your customers. How much time do you want to spend, managing your infrastructure versus creating real value? That's a nice trade-off. So since becoming a fan of the Jamstack approach, I've speculated on some of my past projects and what it would be like if I could go back in time with these tools that I have today, and what would I do differently knowing what I know now. Around 2011, I joined a startup company where we built a white label application service for TV news stations and radio and newspapers. And it was around user-generated content. People would submit photos and videos of things that were happening around in the community, and they would get published to the websites for the like the new TV news stations. They had galleries of the content, and they would show them on air. And serving that content was very much like that web request walk of shame that we talked about. We tried using modern technology for the day, such as caching and a cluster of NoSQL content databases to minimize the number of round trips between the browser and the database. We also had our servers co-located in a data center roughly in the middle of the U.S. so that our customers on the West and East Coast would have an equally terrible experience. And what gave us the most heartburn were these big spikes in traffic, which were usually tied to catastrophic weather events. And those spikes in demand were as unpredictable as the weather. A big storm would come through one of our customers' areas, and we'd be up all day and night doing everything we could to make sure that the system stayed up and responsive, including adding as much hardware as we could In light of what I know about Jamstack today, what would I have done differently if I were to build this platform all over again? Well, every time someone uploaded a video or photo, a build process would be triggered to update static assets and generate a new snapshot of affected media galleries. Those new static assets would be deployed to a CDN, which would be atomically deployed geographically to edge servers all over the country. And when a visitor browsed to the latest content for an event in their area, they would receive static views of that media served from the nearest geographic server. Any personalization would be incrementally added to that experience using some very lightweight APIs. That would have been amazing. No more meltdowns. We have just a few more minutes, but I wanted to share with you that there are, not every person who contributes to a web application is a developer. You have content creators, technical writers, marketing folk, and other contributors who are more comfortable using something like a content management system. Well, there's a whole new market of CMSs and tools that have emerged that fit perfectly with the Jamstack architecture. And these are sometimes referred to as headless CMSs because they are decoupled. The content is decoupled from the presentation. Your content creators can manage content separately from your website itself. And these CMSs, these headless CMSs, generally fall under two categories. There are repository-based and API-based. The Git-based are things like Netlify CMS, Forestry, Tina. These generate markdown and transparently commit those changes back to the same Git repository where the application, where your project lives. So they don't know how to use Git. They don't have to know how to use Markdown or some other syntax. It just takes care of all that complexity for them under the hood, and they can manage their content like they like. On the API-based side of things, you've got services like Contentful and Sanity and Ghost, and these usually generate webhooks or some kind of event that you can use to kick off your static build process as well. And you can query their APIs and get that content programmatically and all kinds of really cool stuff you can do through their APIs. So the obvious next question, where do I get started? Well, here's an overused quote to help motivate you. You can learn more by going to my list of resources. I've included some getting started tutorials covering specific technologies, and the list of resources is a link to jamstack.org. That site can help you learn more about Jamstack, how to choose a static site generator, find a headless CMS, and get connected to the Jamstack community, which is pretty cool and awesome. Now, maybe like me, when you first heard me talk about building static, using static site generators and deploying static files, you might have thought, that sounds terrible. You can't get rid of server-side code. Well, I hope this talk has gotten your wheels turning. Maybe if you really think about it, you might realize, this Jamstack idea just might work. One last thing, I believe that each of us in technology have an incredible opportunity to impact our workplaces, our families, our community, and the entire world in positive and meaningful ways. I hope you take, anything that I've shared with you today and the things that you are learning on your journey that you'll learn the rest of today and tomorrow, and you get out there and be awesome. Thank you. I do have some stickers up here for anyone who would like. And I have one plug. I work for Pluralsight, and Pluralsight is providing the 5 most popular certification courses for free until the end of the year. If you want to get certified, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, Kubernetes, all that kind of cool stuff, this is a great opportunity. Come say hello, ask questions, grab some stickers.